All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about Blood Death Knight in Mythic Plus, and you may be coming from a DPS specialization, and you were like, you know what, I want to start getting invites to keys. Maybe you were playing another tank, and you were like, I want to play something a little more metal. Here we are. Blood Death Knight is very, very cool. They use blood manipulation and the bones of their enemies to heal and shield themselves. It's a very, very badass specialization. I'm going to go through everything that you need to know, talents, gear, stats, rotation, all that sort of stuff will be time-stamped down below, so feel free to skip around to whatever is useful for you. Let's get started. Alright guys, and we're going to do things a little bit out of order in this guide. I know usually I go right into the talents to start, but the talent section is going to be a little bit more intricate than usual because there's some choices that you have. And so I want to give you a little bit of context first on how Blood Death Knight functions so that when we're talking about that, you have a bit of a background, okay? And we'll go into rotation and all of that later, but I just want to give you sort of that context. So Blood Death Knight is really cool in the sense that it spends runes to generate runic power and then heals itself for the damage taken. So you don't do a lot of mitigation. You don't have, you know, some crazy high mitigation where your health just stays flat at all times and never moves like maybe Warrior. You get hit really hard and then you just heal yourself back. It can be very stressful. It can throw a lot of players off because you are always on the verge, one global from dying. But what you are going to be doing is you are going to be using Heart Strike, which costs 1 rune, and you are going to be using Death Strike to heal yourself back, right? So when you go and you hit a target with Heart Strike, it is using runes, and then you get enough runic power to Death Strike and it heals you. The other thing about Death Strike is that your mastery is that when you heal yourself with Death Strike, you gain a physical damage absorption shield. This is called a blood shield. So you get a bit of a sort of a bit of a cushion, right, for for over your health as a blood shield. The other thing is that you have these things called bone shields. So Marrow Rend and some of your other abilities, which we'll get into in the rotation section, generates these little bone shields around you, and once you are at 5 or above, Death Strike costs less runic power. So you always want to be keeping those bone shields up, on top of the fact that they increase your haste and your armor. So that is pretty much your mitigation as Blood Death Knight, but again, you are mostly tanking those hits and then healing it back with Death Strike. Alright guys, and now that you have a bit of a background on what Blood Death Knight is trying to do, I'm going to spend some time going through talents. So if you just want a quick answer, you can go ahead, pause the video, screenshot it. These are the talents that you can run into pretty much every dungeon. For those of you that want to understand the talent choices that we're making, I'm going to spend some time going through Blood as well as the hero talent trees. So starting off with Blood, if you're looking at the high level players, some of these talents are very controversial. Some people are running them, some people are not, and I'm going to give you a bit of an understanding on why I'm running certain talents, why I'm not running certain talents, so that you have that information and you can make that choice for yourself. So one of the controversial ones is Rune Tap. Rune Tap is controversial because it sounds really good, right? And it is good. It's a damage reduction by 20% for 4 seconds on 2 charges, and it costs 1 rune. Now, the problem with this one and why it's controversial is because as you just saw in the little section that I did before this, spending runes is how you generate runic power to heal yourself with Death Strike. So if you are spending runes on Rune Tap, you are essentially stealing runic power from the pool of your rotation, and you are not able to be spending that rune on a Heart Strike to generate runic power to heal yourself. So you are kind of taking a little bit of a shortcut. I don't recommend this talent because I don't like shortcuts like that. I think that if you are trying to learn Blood and become better at it and master the rotation, this is going to be throwing you off. If you do the rotation perfectly or very well, and you commit to learning it, this talent is going to it's going to hinder you a little bit. So I don't personally recommend it. You can, if you really want to, you want to have an extra damage mitigation, you can run it. But again, the focus of Death Knight is to be spending runes on runic power to be healing yourself with Death Strike. So that's a little bit of a background on that one. Bloodied Blade is one that I see a lot of people running. Bloodied Blade, it sounds good at 300% effectiveness heart strike and a strength increase. It's not very good. The other talents are just better. When you sim this versus any other talents, it just doesn't do as much. I don't recommend it personally. Now we are going to get into the intricate part, and that is this talent choice right here. Okay, these ones are very controversial for Blood Death Knight. I'm going to explain both of them and how they work and why you might want one or the other. So Umbilicus Eternus is one that people run because essentially whenever one of your major cooldowns, Vampiric Blood, expires, when it ends, you gain a shield, an absorb shield, for the damage that Blood Plague did during that Vampiric Blood window. So, or 5 times the damage that did. So you get this big shield. Now, there's a couple problems with this. How absorbs work in World of Warcraft is that the last one to be applied is the one that's the damage hits first. So whenever you are death striking constantly, you are constantly getting a blood shield. That means the damage is going to hit the blood shield first before it hits the Umbilicus Eternus shield, 9 times out of 10. So what happens is that Umbilicus Eternus doesn't really get touched. It'll show up really high on your healing meters, but it doesn't really do all that much. There's never been a single case in any log that has been presented of Umbilicus Eternus ever saving someone from death. So that means that there's never been a case where someone has died where they would have lived with this talent. Given that fact, I do not think that Umbilicus Eternus is a very good pick. That is my personal opinion. However, Bloodshot is a very good pick, and it's better than it sounds, and I'll explain why. So while Blood Shield is active, you deal 25% increased physical damage. Now your main physical ability is Death Strike, and you press that a lot. But the caveat here is that it's while Blood Shield is active. So you're saying, well, I get hit all the time. I don't always have a Blood Shield active. But the way that Blood Shield works is that when you Death Strike, the Blood Shield is applied to you before the actual damage is applied to the enemy. This means that this talent is 100% working 100% of the time. So it is a flat 25% damage increase to your Death Strike at all times. So this is why I just wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining this stuff, because how it looks on paper versus how they actually function in the game are a little bit different, and I want you to have all of the background that you can have to make these decisions for yourself. Alright guys, now we're going to talk a little bit about hero talents. So we have Sanlane and Deathbringer. Deathbringer is a little more passively tanky because it is very easy to maintain your Bone Shield stacks. You also have access to Rune Carved Plates and Wave of Souls, which give you some passive mitigation for just doing your rotation. Sanlane is a little bit better at single target damage. Deathbringer still deals competitive damage and great AoE damage, but Sanlane edges it out for single target. Sanlane, because of that single target, I like Sanlane better. Just killing priority mobs in a pack, those really big scary ones, having some more damage for them. Also, Sin Lane typically likes playing with more haste. Deathbringer likes playing with more crit mastery. I'll get into the stats and all that stuff in a little bit, but just for a bit of background when you are making your choice. Both competitive, both good. You can play either one. And honestly, when I play either one, I still run the exact same talent build. Alright guys, and now in order to understand the rotation for Blood, there's some nuance to it. And I'm going to spend some time talking about the core rotation, and then we'll go into some of the cooldowns that you have. So the core rotation revolves around a couple abilities. There's Blood Boil, which is an AoE threat generator and applies Blood Plague, which does damage to the target and heals you. You also have Marrow Rend, which whenever you use Marrow Rend, it'll give you Bone Shield charges. We talked about those a little bit. Bone Shield charges increase your armor and your haste, so it's a nice little mitigation tool. You want to always be above 5 Bone Shield charges because Death Strike costs less runic power when you are above 5 Bone Shield charges. So make an add-on, weak aura, whatever to track that, and always make sure that you are above the 5 Bone Shield charges at all times. You don't want to be maxed out on it, because if you're maxed out on it, you're spending a lot of runes. Marrow Rend costs 2 runes instead of 1, so it's sort of a balancing game of making sure that you have enough Bone Shield charges for Death Strike to cost less, but you're not spending too many runes on generating them. So it's just a balancing game. And then Heart Strike is going to be your main generator. So Heart Strike does some damage. When you are in Death and Decay, Heart Strike also cleaves, and you generate enough runic power to press Death Strike. Alright guys, now we're going to talk a little bit about the major cooldowns that you have, and Blood is a bit unique. It doesn't have any crazy cooldowns like you can jump in a pack and press Metamorphosis and you're totally fine. It's about rotating these cooldowns and weaving them into your rotation, and once you master that gameplay loop, you feel immortal. You feel like you can solo a dungeon. It's very satisfying to master, but it is there's some nuance, there's some understanding that you have to have. So first I'm going to explain those cooldowns, and then I'm going to explain how they interact with each other. So Dancing Rune Weapon, how that works is it is an offensive and a defensive cooldown. You create copies of your Rune Blade, as you can see, and then when you press an ability like Blood Boil, it hits them again for Blood Boil, and you can get 3 of them active. Same thing with Vampiric Strike, and same thing with Death Strike. So as you can see, that can be a lot of extra damage, right? But it's also very good defensively because it increases your parry, and when you're hitting someone with 3 Death Strikes, that's a lot of healing. So very strong ability, and you want to be using this as much as possible. So before we talk about how you can use it as much as possible, I'll show you the other abilities. So another ability that you have is Tombstone. So Tombstone makes it so that when you have up to 5 Bone Shield charges, you can press Tombstone. It does some damage, it gives you an Absorb Shield, and it starts resetting the cooldown for Dancing Rune Weapon. You get a cooldown reduction for every Bone Shield charge that you use. So this is where the nuance starts coming in. This is where it starts getting exciting, okay? Because the cooldown reduction can allow you to have Dancing Rune Weapon active pretty often. So you're going to do the same thing with this other ability, and that's Bone Storm. Bone Storm works pretty similar to Tombstone. The only real difference here is that instead of giving you an Absorb Shield, it heals you slowly, and it also regenerates Bone Shield charges. So same deal. What we do is we build up over 5 Bone Shield charges, and then we can Bone Storm and see Dancing Rune Weapon is now back. That 2-minute cooldown has recovered, and we can go and hit someone with that again. So the other thing about these is that Bone Shield, because of this talent here, Shattering Bone, When Bone Shield is consumed, it shatters, dealing shadow damage to nearby enemies. The damage is tripled while you're in Death and Decay. So you want to make sure on Blood, not only that you are standing in Death and Decay for the buffs, the cleave on Heartstrike, but also to make sure that you are tripling your damage of the Bone Shield charges being used. So the Bone Shield charges get used either by taking damage from enemies or from using these abilities that give you that cooldown reduction. Some of the other cooldowns that you have are going to be Vampiric Blood. This one, I try and use this one pretty often, and especially in a scary situation. It increases your maximum health and increases all healing received. That is healing to yourself, that is healing from the healer. So you want to be using that pretty often. So you also get some cooldown reduction for that. So every time that you are spending runic power, you are also getting cooldown reduction on Vampiric Blood. So these look like big, long cooldowns, but you kind of want to be sending them often. You want to be using them often because your gameplay loop gives you that reduction. Some of the other cooldowns that you have, Icebound Fortitude can remove all stuns. It is a damage mitigation by 30%. Anti-Magic Shell, I use that pretty much every pack. It is really good. It prevents magic damage or magic effects from being applied to you, as well as shields you for some magic damage. We have another offensive ability right here, and that is Consumption. Consumption, what that does is it basically increases the speed at which your Blood Plague damage is going to occur. You can pretty much use this on cooldown. I like using it with Dancing Rune Weapon because I have the 3 Blood Plagues ticking at a time, but you can safely use it on cooldown if you'd like. Alright, and the last thing I'm going to talk about before stats is the first pull of a dungeon, because this is where I see so many Blood Death Knights walk into a pack of mobs and they just fall over, right? They just get hit too hard and they die, and they're like, I don't know what happened. I just got deleted. We're going to talk a little bit about how to prevent that, okay? Blood Death Knight is very scary to play at the start of a pull. Once you get your rotation going, you are effectively immortal. But at the very start of a pull, it's scary. You don't have any runic power yet. You don't have any bone shield charges yet to make to have some mitigation or make Deathstrike cost less. So you're very scared at the beginning. And it's important that you use your cooldowns and weave them into your rotation to keep yourself alive. So I'm going to do this a little slow, okay? So if you're seeing like, oh, your bone shields are falling off or any of that, I'm just going to do this really slow so I can explain it to you guys. Abomination's Limb generates 5 bone shield charges. Dancing Rune Weapon generates 5 bone shield charges. Bone Storm generates bone shield charge, it spends them, it generates them, gives you cooldown reduction, some healing, and some damage. So those are pretty much the abilities that you're going to use right away. Death and Decay, you're going to be dropping and making sure it is active all the time. It's essentially a buff, okay, that you just want maintained all the time. So when you're walking up to the pack of mobs, we're dropping Death and Decay, we're pressing Abomination's Limb, we're pressing Dancing Rune Weapon, and then we're pressing Bone Storm to immediately get some cooldown reduction, some healing. We're pressing Blood Boil to get it active on everybody, maintaining the buff of Death and Decay, and then we're pressing Vampiric Strike to generate some rune power, Death Striking to keep ourselves alive. And now that Dancing Rune Weapon is over, we are going to press Tombstone to get some more of that cooldown reduction and an Absorb Shield. And we're still going with our rotation, so we're Death Striking. We're keeping Blood Boil active. We're keeping Death and Decay active. Heart Strikes, Death Strikes, Heart Strikes, Death Strikes. And then when that Absorb Shield is over, now we're going to press Vampiric Blood to make sure that we're still weaving defensive abilities into our rotation. Keeping Bone Shields above 5. Death Strike, right? We're just making sure that we're weaving everything. As soon as Vampiric Blood is over, we are pressing another cooldown. So we're going to press Lichborn, right? Maintaining Death and Decay, making sure we're spending runes, we're spending runic power, spending runes, spending runic power. Now we have Dancing Rune Weapon back up. We are pressing that. Making sure we keep Blood Boil, Death and Decay, cooldown reduction. You see how we're just weaving this stuff in? When this is over, we're going to be pressing Tombstone. And you're just making sure that you're weaving everything together. That is how you live as Blood Death Knight. You don't have one cooldown that is going to save you. You don't have anything like that. It's just weaving them in. As soon as one cooldown is over, you're pressing the other one. You have so much cooldown reduction. You kind of always want to be using these cooldowns in a rotational way rather than in a, oh shit, I'm going to die, I need to press this kind of way. That is the secret to Blood Decay. That is how you can make sure that you live. It's all about getting that cooldown reduction. It's all about keeping yourself, making sure you're spending runes, you're spending runic power, you're having more than 5 bone shields. If any of this is still not clicking with any of you, you can come by my Twitch. I will go through this with you. We can break it down further together. Blood Death Knight is a little more intricate than I know some of the other tanks may be with their rotation. I get it, okay? It's scary because you're taking a lot of damage and you're very self-reliant. But when you practice this, when you get this down, it's very, very, very satisfying. So I'm hoping that helps. All right, guys, last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about stats and gearing. So your stats, I'm going to talk about what they all do, and then I'm going to talk about the synergies that they have with each hero talent tree. So Critical Strike increases the effectiveness on attacks and heals. So this allows you to get some really big death strikes, some really big death strike heals. It's pretty satisfying. Haste increases your attack speed and rune regeneration. Mastery gives you a damage buff as well as increases the value out of your blood shield. So that blood shield that you get when you death strike gives you an extra cushion. And then versatility is a flat damage and healing buff. So a lot of tanks run verse for that reason, and you with a lot of self heals, it is also very valuable. Now, Sand Lane, Sand Lane likes haste. There's a lot of synergy between haste and Sand Lane. So if I was to put these in order, I would say strength above all else, haste for Sand Lane, and then a mix of critical strike, mastery, and versatility. Deathbringer is the opposite. Deathbringer has a lot of synergy with crit and does not have that same synergy with haste. So if I was playing Deathbringer, I would say strength, and then crit, and then a mix of mastery, versatility, and some haste. So those are your options for gearing. As far as trinkets go, right now I have these 2 trinkets. I'll talk about the other ones that are very popular. You have Eye of Kazan from Gallywix that everyone is after. That one is really good in long fights or chain pulls in Mythic Plus. If you're not doing chain pulls or you're having short fights, that trinket isn't really the best. The other option that you have is House of Cards. This is big mastery increase. It's just a big damage trinket. Typically, right now, you can get away with running both trinkets as damage trinkets or one tank trinket and 1 damage trinket. The tank trinkets aren't great this season, so you can get away with full damage, which is kind of fun. It's a little different, but next we'll talk about your rune forges. And so for rune forges, if you are running Sand Lane specifically, you are going to use the Rune of Sanguination, because it is going to give you a buff to your Death Strike damage. So, because Sand Lane has so much synergy with Death Strike damage, if you are running Sand Lane, you will run the Rune of Sanguination. If you are running Deathbringer, you will run the Rune of Fallen Crusader. So those are your options for those hero talents for your Runeforge. As far as the tier set goes, because you like all of the stats as Blood DK, it doesn't matter where you're putting them, as long as your gear ends up having your desired stats overall with the jewelry and stuff that you make. But your tier set, what it does is it makes it so you get procs of Icebound Fortitude that just automatically cast. So it's just some passive reduction as well as some passive damage buffs. Alright guys, just wanted to say a quick thank you for watching. I really appreciate all the the comments that everyone was leaving on my last video for the guides. It reaffirms me that I'm actually helping someone with making this stuff. So look, I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave a comment and let me know that you're liking it or anything that I could be doing better. I want to make sure I'm making good content for you guys that's valuable and easy to understand. So if there's anything I can be doing better, anything that you want to see, I know someone had mentioned something about some off-meta builds, like a Frost two-handed build. I'm happy to make that stuff as well. I love the ideas. And if you have, more direct questions, you want to just have a chat about this stuff, I stream on Twitch, and you can find me at Skull and Bones TV. So thank you again for watching, and have a great one. Suffer well, Death Knights.